Welcome everybody, thank you for coming. Last time when we had a similar theme, I was using this kind of Graham lecture, after which I was heavily beaten by the gentleman because he doesn't like it. What we have today is kind of the third of these presentations, discussions. And as we have the third, we can build on topics and questions, actually, two topics which have been discussed in the first two cases. What I want to say is that behind this pretty fancy title, we had to give it a somewhat broader, more general title, but it all started off with a question which was very much down to earth and which was raised in one of these meetings. I think it was the first one. And when we came across this issue, now, okay, we have a policy, and kind of the policy has these objectives and good ideas and all that. And then we have projects, or we have some stuff on the ground which kind of doesn't match these good ideas. And how can we bring this together? What I wanted to say as an introduction is kind of the subtitle to this official fancy title is something which I hope, which we hope, is indeed something which is relevant for your everyday, hopefully not every day, but daily practice, daily work routine. We have good ideas, we work on the national level, government level, policy, design, and hope for outcomes, and then we see that, okay, that kind of doesn't really match the realities we find on the ground. And the same thing, you see several of us, and we see several of you. This is also something which we in our work as the RDPA team, which we also observe in many cases. And that's why it's good to have that circle of, or that group of people which is working together on a very regular, very close basis, to again have the chance to get some input, some stimulation, some challenging thoughts from the outside. And with this, Graham, the floor is yours.
Fine, thank you. It is, Matthias is right, it is a fancy title, but one problem about decentralized management of policy, whether you do it in the European Union or whether you do it in Ukraine, is how do you manage to make sure that the people who are implementing the policy are actually doing what you would like them to do? How can you be sure that the policy that's being implemented is the one that you've tried to design? And if I talk to you about it in the European Union, it's not to tell you that we have solved the problem, because I don't think the European Union has solved the problem. It's to say to you that it happens everywhere. If you have difficulties in Ukraine in making sure that people who are implementing the policy do the right things, then Ukraine is just like everywhere else. It's a common problem. And it's a very serious problem in the sense that it can change the way in which the policy operates. So if you look at the evolution of European Union policy, you see that there are regular attempts to actually reduce the decentralization. There are more and more attempts to try to control from the center right down to the as it were, the interface with projects or whatever. More and more attempts to try to bring that under control. So decentralization is not an easy way to implement policy. And Matthias is right, in the last meeting, if you remember, last time we were together, Natalia Starostenko from the EU delegation said, what do we do if there are projects which are taken over by people in the oblasts or the Hromadas who are powerful politically, and they want to do things which are not in line with what we've said we would do in our program or what we want to do. How do you resist? Do you phone Clint Eastwood and say, can you come and kill this person for me? Or do you go to the minister and say, protect me from this terrible fate? Or what do you do? And it was starting from that I thought, okay, it's possible to answer that question by throwing some light on the difficulty of decentralization. So what's one of the ways in which the European Union tries to, as it were, make sure that the policy which is being implemented is the one which is being designed and not something that was invented by someone else? And secondly, how does the European Union try to make sure that the implementation at the interface with projects is not taken over and subverted by someone who is trying to operate outside the system? And we do that. So let me go back to something I said to you the last time. I have this thing about the stages of policy, implementation, and facts on the ground. And I was saying the last time that all policies, whether we're talking about foreign policy, budget policy, or whatever, they have an implementation mechanism. And the implementation mechanism or system is extremely important. And it's only through the implementation system that the policy changes facts on the ground. There is no other way. So you may be the Nobel Prize winner for regional development, and you may design the perfect policy, but if it is not well implemented, it will not have the impact on the ground that you think it will. And when a policy is not working on the ground, you have to always be able to ask yourself, is it the policy? Is it something in the design of the policy which is wrong? Or is it the way in which we are implementing it which is wrong? And often it's the way that you are implementing it which is wrong. When politicians come to you and say, oh, that's not working, let's change the policy, that's often a bad thing, because really it's in the implementation box that things are not going well. And then this is exactly the same picture, but with the feedback loop of evaluation put on the top. And you've got two circuits. You can have a circuit starting with implementation. So implementation does things, the facts on the ground are evaluated, the evaluation results come back to the implementers, and the implementers can decide how to try to improve their way of delivering the policy. Or the results from the evaluation can impact the policy. You can decide, the policy is wrong, the policy needs to be adjusted. So you have these three elements of the policy with this feedback loop. And now here's the slide I'm really most proud of, which is the same slide. You can see the three towers, and you can see the feedback loop on the top for evaluation, which I've now put down as reporting, audit, and evaluation. And you can see the interaction between the different elements. So the policy, if it becomes a fact on the ground through the policy, through these projects, has these impacts on the ground. And the projects in the ideal system are in agreement with the objectives of the policy and obviously within the budget of the policy. And they're also in agreement with the strategies that were made by the oblasts and talked about, and they unite the policy and the needs of the region. What happens if this border here, which I'm trying to indicate, between objective and the projects is impermeable? In other words, if the oblasts or the hromadas don't take any notice of what happens in the policy and just do what they wanted to do anyway. Or what happens if the projects are totally outside this system and they're somehow coming from someone outside and they're pushing them through, and they might not be in agreement with what was in the policy or in the strategy or program. And this, I think, is a fairly common set of circumstances. And there are two ways of dealing with it. The first is, of course, it should be picked up by the reporting, audit and evaluation, and that would enable you to correct. And in the European Union, if we discover that there are projects which are way outside what should be done, then we declare them to be ineligible for European Union funding, and the funding would be clawed back. But the fault of that system the fact is that it's ex post. So the money is used, you only discover the thing that's gone wrong afterwards. You can put it right, but that's not very good. Can you try to put the problem right before it takes place? Can you actually put the problem right ex ante, so that you don't have to go through the traumatic process of drawing money back from a project which doesn't work? And we try to do that through a system of what we call project selection criteria, and they are given a sort of force in the regulation. So this just sums up what I've been saying. Policy impacts reality through projects. So how can we ensure that projects follow the policy's objectives and the oblast or the national strategy? And this is the critical question. How do we know, and how can we be sure that what we're talking about all the time is actually what is being put into practice? Now in the EU, and I think it's the same here, the policy, the law which contains the policy fixes the frame for implementation. So it fixes the objectives and it fixes the scope for assistance. So the kind of, I'll explain this in a minute, the kind of projects which can be supported.
Sorry for interrupt. Is it okay to interrupt this question?
Yeah, of course it is.
In this particular case, the objective, policy legislation fixes the objective, right?
Yeah.
Does it?
Yeah. I'll come to that in a minute, but yeah. And it fixes the scope for assistance. I'll explain both of those terms in a minute. But the important thing to point out at the moment is, so the regional program has two kinds of boundaries. It has geographical boundaries and it has regulatory boundaries. So the objectives and the scope are almost interchangeable. So here by interchangeable, the words which are used to describe the objectives sometimes describe the scope. But here are some of the words. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Here are some of the words. So you're looking for growth you're looking to create development which is sustainable, which is harmonious. You don't have to understand what the words mean. They're not here for you to learn, as it were. They're here to illustrate something later. The objective would be sustainable growth, harmonious development, balanced and integrated development. I think integration is extremely important. Development that integrates human resource investment and physical investment. You want the investment to be productive and to create jobs. You could invest in infrastructure, or you can invest in endogenous potential through small and medium-sized businesses and so on. And that might mean that you want to create the sort of services that they need in order to develop. Just remember the idea that you've got lots of words here which describe objectives and they describe scope. And here are some more words. You want the regulation. These are all words taken from the regulation. So these words might not look like law to you, but they're words which you'll discover in a few minutes are helpful to us because they have the force of law, because they're in the regulation. So you want investments which strengthen economic and social cohesion, you want to protect and improve the environment, You want to conform with the EU strategic guidelines. That's obviously very, very important. You want to target EU priorities. That's equally important. You want equality between women and men. You don't want to create jobs for just men. You want to just train men to be entrepreneurs. You want women entrepreneurs, and you want women in employment. And here are some more words. The purpose of all of these words you'll find in the regulations, and that gives them a rather sort of hallowed standing. So research and technological development, SMEs, information society, local development, tourism and culture, energy, education. So if we look back at scope, you see that the scope of the policy covers all of these things. If we look at objectives, you see that the objective is to help SMEs or the information society or whatever. That's why I say they're interchangeable. Now then, I've actually given you a legal reference here, but this regulation, I have to tell you, is now out of date. But I have an emotional attachment to it.
Oh, baby.
So, yeah, but that means that every program has a program monitoring committee. So every program has, down at the level of the region or of the city or of the locality, a group of people who will manage the program. These are the people who are, as it were, at the interface between the policy and what you're trying to achieve on the ground. So these are the people that you're trying to make sure march in step with the policy that you're creating at the central level. And the law requires these people, within 6 months of the program's approval, to agree a set of criteria for the selection of projects. So they consult back to the centre with this set of criteria. This is something, so this is, as it were, the final moment when, before they go out to approve projects, before they go out to spend the money that they've been allocated, they come to you and say, are we on the right lines? And you can make sure that they're on the right lines. They come with this set of selection criteria. And now, let me go back. They come to you with this set of selection criteria, and this is where the words I've just been putting up in the slides become useful, because although the selection criteria that they use will not be enforceable by law, so although if someone in the oblast or the Hromada comes and says, I have this project, I'm a powerful guy, you have to implement this project, you won't be able, you will say, no, it's not in agreement with the selection criteria. He might say to you, or she might say to you, where in the law does it say I can't get this project financed? And you can't show in the law that this kind of project is ineligible, except by the fact that you've knitted these words from the law into your selection criteria. I didn't put any on slides because you can sort of make them up for yourselves, but I can, if I can find where
This monitoring committee, at what level is it established? Is it not school, regional, or is it national level?
It depends on depends on the program. If the program aims at a NUTS 2 region, then the monitoring committee is established at the regional level. If the monitoring committee is within, let's say, a city, then it will be at the city level. If the monitoring committee is within a locality, then it will be within the level of the locality. And it's always, each of the committees looks the same. They're like Lego bricks, if you think. So if you can understand one committee, you can understand all of them. They will have a chairperson who is probably from outside the locality. If it's at the region, it might be someone from the national administration. From the region, but the national administration. But they will always contain local authority people. They will always contain NGOs which have an interest in what the programs are trying to achieve. They will often contain social partners, trade unions, entrepreneurs, and so on.
Okay, so we can say that the process of approving, selecting, defining criteria for project selection is hugely decentralized, right? Or it is decentralized.
First of all, the task of searching for and initiating projects is decentralized. The business of managing the search for projects, i.e. calls for projects to be submitted and so on, that's decentralized. The selection of the projects for financing is decentralized. The management of the management of the project to ensure that it is actually carried out is decentralized. The whole thing is done by the people, as it were, at the interface with, if you like, the economy or the social group or whatever. And because it's all decentralized, obviously you have the task at the center of trying to make sure that, well, they're doing on their own responsibility and in their own way things which fit in with what we would want them to do. So if we want them to invest in information society technology or infrastructure, they're not building swimming pools or they're not making football grounds. So certain things we have in the law that they can't do, swimming pools. Other things we would rule out through the selection criteria and discussion with the region. Sometimes we've had people who've nevertheless said, we're stronger than you, and they will go ahead and make a swimming pool or something, and you catch them out by the ex post check afterwards. When you discover that they've made a swimming pool, you cancel the resources.
I asked, you said before that the selection criteria are not reflected in law. What is the legal status of the Programme Monitoring Committee?
That's in the law.
Yeah, so I would suggest to you that, if I want a football field or a swimming pool, I cannot force the Programme Managing Committee to approve such a project, but in effect, if you give authority to the Programme Monitoring Committee to decide what the selection criteria are, you are in effect indirectly writing the selection criteria into the law by saying only these people have the right to make those criteria, only the criteria that are approved by them will be applied. You have, in effect, made the criteria. You have given some legal basis, because you need a legal basis for refusal later on. Yes.
Yeah, but the problem about relying on the law is that it works ex post.
Yes.
So, for example, I can give you a spectacular example. We put 100 million units of euros into Greece for the creation of a land registry.
Yeah.
And after 3 or 4 years, they came and said, can you give us another 170 million to help us continue with the registry? And we said, how much have you managed to register with the 100 million that you've already received? And they'd hardly done anything. So obviously that makes it easy. We didn't give them the 170 million that they were asking for. But the next question is, well, how do we make them give back the 100? They had to give back the 100, but it's a fairly long process. And the problem, in effect, is that while the 100 has been tied up in the land registry, it's not been available to do something else. So that's the cost of going down only the legal route, is that you get money tied up, and by the time you claw it back, you can't use it, because the programs are all limited in time, and if you're not careful, you get the money back when it's out of time. So the money goes back to the member states, to the union, and back to the member states. So it's very important.
The only way you get around that is to give the Programme Monitoring Committee the right in advance to confirm that the project meets with the criteria.
Yeah, but the problem, the difficulty that we're talking about basically is that there are people who terrorize the program monitoring committees.
Right.
Now, Brexit is going on, and that's why I'm wearing a suit and trying to look serious. So, years ago, in one of our programs in the United Kingdom, the member state, the United Kingdom government, was bringing forward training schemes to be financed through our program in a committee which was being chaired by someone from the United Kingdom administration. Okay? So here you have a European Union program, the committee is being chaired by someone from the UK government, and the UK government is bringing forward low quality schemes, poor quality schemes, thinking that they can get 50% of the cost of these schemes from the European Union program. Okay? Right. The man who was the chairman of the committee and who was from the United Kingdom government refused to finance the schemes. He was dismissed. Later he lost his job. So, but the point that I'm getting at is that under normal circumstances, if the United Kingdom government brings to a committee a scheme and says, I want you to finance this, no matter how much legal cover you've got, the chairman of the committee or the chairperson of the committee is going to say, okay, fine, it's more than my job's worth to prevent. So you need, in my view, to strengthen the hands of the committees, not by saying you are legally entitled to turn this down, but by making sure that they are managing projects through this set of selection criteria. And perhaps we'll come back to this, but it's a good idea to go on to the next slide. So if these selection criteria are transparent, they're published and widely known from the beginning of the program, and they're routine, and they're operated for all projects, and that they're explicit, and they incorporate the language of the basic laws, and they're fair, and they don't discriminate between project sponsors, then they do begin to take for themselves a very strong legal power, because it's very difficult for anyone to say, well, hang on a minute, I must have my project. You say, well, hang on, it has to go through, we have to apply the criteria because it's routine. We operate it for all projects. So even if you're the government, you have to go through the criteria. And, well, what criteria? You've made these... No, these criteria are transparent. They've been published. They've been known for ages. You knew that when you were making the project. Yeah, but you've just made these up. I mean, anybody can make up. No, we've used language from the basic regulation. These all they may not be in the law, but they have the force of law. And you can see that the local program committees gain in confidence, and they gain in power in argument if they're operating the selection criteria in this particular way. And to come back to the point that Madame Starastenko raised the last time, which is people pushing in projects which shouldn't be in the programs, or the point that I mentioned earlier when a previous project lost resources which had been allocated for regional development for projects for internally displaced people. I've always felt that, okay, it may not have been that the regions were planning to do these things for internally displaced people, but if they nevertheless confront these projects with the project selection criteria, it may well be that they can discover ways in which the project can be reframed So it still does the same thing for internally displaced people, but operates in a way which is more in keeping with the program and produces other byproduct benefits. And even if it doesn't produce any other benefit, you've protected the integrity of the program, because even something which the government wanted you to do and ordered you to do has gone through the routine procedure. So the integrity of the program is maintained. So I didn't have a slide for this, but I tried to think up, using the language which I put on in the other slides, some selection criteria. So one of the questions that you can ask is, what contribution will this project make to local or regional development? So that's quite clearly a relevant question. So, and there you can boil this down into questions like, what priorities in the program will it support? What contribution will it make to improving competitiveness? What impact will it have in helping us to meet our quantitative targets? And then there's a killer question: could this project be carried out without program finance? And in all of our selection criteria, that if the answer to that question was no, yes, it could be carried out without, then it didn't go any further. It was refused because it could be done. Our money was scarce, and now you would think, well, nobody would be stupid enough. Nobody's going to say, can this project be carried out without EU finance? Nobody's going to be stupid enough to say yes, but they do. The funny thing is that we all focus our attention on corruption and people who are wanting to trick us. There are honest people. I mean, there are a surprisingly large number of honest people. And I could mention one case where the government in the United Kingdom had delayed in introducing a program, and they introduced a project which was going to cost something like €6 million for a road. And the application form and the criteria, the application form was brought to the chief executive of this local authority. And the first question on the thing is, could this project be carried out without program finance? Could this project be carried out without EU finance? And the guy looked out of his window, and there was the road. It was already there. There were cars going on. So he answered, yes, it could be carried out. So the project was disqualified. And it caused an enormous storm. The government wasn't used to meeting honest people, and governments don't like it when they're... But yeah, so people do sometimes. Now then, you could have criteria which assess the project's performance. What... a good question, does the requesting body have sufficient income to operate and maintain the project? So, for example, if you want to make a swimming pool, does the local authority have the money to pay for the people to run the swimming pool and to maintain the swimming pool? If they want to make these roads, can they maintain these roads? Do they? Then you can judge the value of the project by having selection criteria. How many permanent jobs will the project create? How many of these jobs will be for women? Are there sufficient qualified people in the locality to get these jobs? Or even, are there sufficiently qualified people in the locality to build the project? What's the ratio of requested co-finance to the number of jobs which are created? You can begin to inch through these selection criteria towards the idea of a cost of public funds per job created. The timeliness of the project. How certain is the project? When will work start on its construction? When will it be completed? How will the project be integrated into the locality? these are just some that I've thought of as I was writing these things down. I could try to find for you in historical records examples of old selection criteria used in programs. The next stage after you've got these criteria is that you can assign scores to them. You can score them out of 10, or you can... Now this is a fairly rough and ready way of doing things, but it enables you at the end to compare. So you don't only make sure that the project fits in with what you're trying to achieve, but by scoring the selection criteria, you can make sure that you choose the best projects for the area. Now then, you could say, well, that's rough and ready. Well, it is rough and ready, but if one project scores 60 and another scores 20, it looks on the face of things as if one project is going to be better for the region than another. So you're not scoring stuff down to the nearest decimal point. You're looking for broad categories. So, 3 final points. To repeat what I said, which is a selection process like this can improve all projects, even those that you feel you have to carry out. The detailed criteria might not be mentioned as detailed criteria in the law, but they have the force of law. And then, one point I didn't mention there, they enable you to make sure that what's going on the ground is actually what you're seeking to achieve through the policy, even though you're operating it in a totally decentralized way. And then the last point, which has got really nothing to do with what we've been talking about, but it should be clear that we're talking about a system which requires knowledge and ability on the part of the people who are operating it at the Gramada or the Oblast level. And so efficient systems require able administrators, and the importance of building the abilities and the capacities of the people who actually operate the programs is absolutely essential. The capacity building and making sure that we have strong and stable teams to operate these programs is absolutely a basic requirement. There, thank you. Now we can all go for a cup of tea.
I'll ask a question about how the programme monitoring committees are set up, because the example you gave us of the pressure applied to a UK chairman of a committee to support a UK project suggests to me that one of the issues is actually selecting a committee which is sufficiently independent and where there is a minimum number of levers for applying external pressure.
Yeah, our experience.
There needs to be a degree of independence from either the funding agency or from the people who want the projects in order for them to be able to do.
Our experience was something like this. I'll compare the Federal Republic with the United Kingdom. So in the Federal Republic, you tended to get a much more single, homogeneous view of what should be done. Okay, and I used to think that this was because the government was actually saying to everybody, right, don't you dare say anything against me in this meeting. But no, it was because part of the way in which Länder operate their regional policies, development policies, starts out from very, very thorough regional conferences about what should be done and how it should be done and how it should be financed. So the people who were in the committee had all been through a huge amount of preparation together, which had brought in different points of view, and they had arrived at, as it were, a fairly coherent view about what they wanted. In the United Kingdom, at the time we started, there was no regional level of governance at all. So they had to make some sort of ad hoc regional governments to implement our programs. And there you saw in the committees a group of people who, although the government may have had a clear view about what it wanted to come out, because there were people in the committees who came from NGOs or people from local government who suddenly found that they had the confidence because the union was there that they could actually, they could say what they thought. We found that we didn't have, you had cases of problems where too much pressure was being exerted, but most of the time the pressure was felt in the training part of the programs rather than in the physical investment part. The physical investment was almost by its nature geographically differentiated, whereas training, the central government thought, I know how to train people and I have my systems and I want everybody to be trained in my way towards my qualifications. So in a certain sense, you have had a difficulty there. But we always found that there is always a certain amount of bossing coming from the national government, but in the course of the work of the committee that would be diluted, but never eliminated, or rarely eliminated.
Вопросы, кстати, можно спокойно задавать на украинском. Мы справимся. Если кто-то хочет, но немножко как бы боится задавать вопрос на английском, это не причина.
I just have a comment, looking at the Ukrainian situation and trying to build on the good and bad practices of EU. We've designed this system, and you covered this in your previous conversation with the directorate, that it is very much about the design, very little about implementation. So the design is, we're working a lot about designing, redesigning, and then looking at implementation doesn't really follow what has been designed. But it strikes me that whenever the source of money is from outside, like it is, for example, the sector budget supporting money, or it's EU cross-border program, so the rules are perfectly followed. Municipalities are submitting the projects according to the programs, they are evaluated according to the selection criteria, etc., and it seems to work. Well, it's Ukraine, the source of money is different, the rules are translated into Ukrainian, in Ukrainian language. They are followed.
Part of the national legislation.
Part of the national legislation. Whenever it comes to the Ukrainian monies, this beautiful system suddenly breaks down, and Romanas are submitting all projects they have in their drawers. Doesn't matter what the program says, what the priority of the program are, etc. They don't care. They just submit, just in case. Maybe we'll find someone who will lobby, etc., etc. So all these rules suddenly are not taken into account by all layers, by the Romanas who submit, by the regional level, which evaluates and sometimes can also submits. This is the struggle. This is the struggle we are fighting. These regulations suddenly lose the sense. And how did you deal with this? I know that there were problems in Romania and Bulgaria and new countries. What was the nature of these problems, and how the EU was dealing with those?
The first thing is, I don't think that you can. Some of these problems that you have, you can tackle through the law, but you can't tackle all of them through the law. And in my view, you cannot bring about change behavior necessarily through the law. So we have to look for another way of making people do things, as it were, differently, where differently means in the way that we would like them to operate. That's the first point. The second point is to, if you look at the content of the programs in the European Union, we began to operate in this particular way in 1989. And the first thing you noticed was, when you imagine that there is a desk in a region with drawers, and you're just beginning, this is the first time someone's come and said, I've got money here, we can do projects. First time, and you can choose the projects. They open the drawers, and the drawers are full of projects. And the projects are not necessarily what we would consider to be the sort of thing we want to do. They're sort of projects that more reflect their need. So we got lots of things coming forward which were at the border of what we wanted. And we eventually found the courage to say to ourselves, okay, well, let's just start off, and perhaps in 5 years' time, the drawers won't be so full. They'll have actually done the things. And I find that when I look at Ukraine, if I was living in a Ramada somewhere here and somebody came to me and said, we've got a new policy and we're going to give you the chance to actually make some investments, I'd look around my Ramada and I think, shit, for the first time we can actually insulate the local clinic, and I don't have to sit there shivering through the winter while I'm waiting to see the doctor. Or we can mend the windows in the school, or we can do lots of the things that are... So our view might be that's not exactly what we would want you to do with this money, because we want you to look at economic development and so on. But it's fairly human, in my view, and fairly normal that when you go to somebody and they've got needs which have built up over years and years and years, and you say, I've got some money, the first thing they want to do is try to meet what they consider to be their needs. So then we come back to my selection criteria, so my view is, okay, you want to do the clinic, you want to I wouldn't say no, but you have to bring it forward and it has to go through the selection criteria. So how will you educate people to think in a new way? What jobs will this create? Do we have people in the Hrmada who can do these jobs? Do we have people who can do the jobs when the clinic's mended? Do we need to train someone to do these jobs before we start work? Or is there a sequence that we should follow? You can actually use the fact that they have this urge to fill, as it were, long-felt need, to begin to induct them into a regional approach. And I find that to be more constructive than when they come forward with their project and say, sorry, you can't bring that project, we don't allow that project. You have to go back and think of something else. And I find that way you're, first of all, putting yourself outside their area of, as it were, ambition, which is bad. And I think you're missing a chance to educate people into what you want them to do, which is also bad. And I've said this to you before, by not spending the money, you're leaving it there for someone else. Public money gets spent. So if you don't use it to put the windows in the school, somebody will come and say, I want to use it for my swimming pool. And then you're in a jam, because if this person's sitting in the parliament or is a friend of the ministers or whatever, then you say, well, I don't think that doesn't fit in with what we want. Well, we've got the money and you're not using the money. Why can't I use it for my swimming pool? The worst, if you're going to have these battles about whether you can accept this project or not, the worst position for you to be in is with a lot of money which you haven't spent because you haven't found any projects that you feel come up to your grade. That's a really weak position to be in.
This is the worst situation, Graham? Maybe the worst is when inappropriate projects have been financed and this approach, this way the whole systemic approach is ruined.
Yeah, okay.
It's no worse.
Okay, well, yeah, but I've tried to suggest a way in which, even if you have to accept something that you don't want, if you can say it has to go through it has to go through the sort of selection grid, you can still draw some kind of benefit from it. I told you about the pipeline in South Africa, big project, multi-million project. And when they were doing it, they found they hadn't got people who could weld the pipes together. They had to import labour from Mozambique. The rate of unemployment in South Africa is 50%. And they were having to import labour to do something which, if they'd thought about it and passed it through some kind of selection process, they could say, oh, we don't have pipe welders, let's train some now. So you can always, in my view, get benefits. And you can protect, in that way, the integrity of the system.
Ms. Fellinger.
Do you allow me a question? Or question your party, then I even take the time. If you have such a broad selection criteria approach, how do you make sure that the projects are not put forward, to various investment vehicles? So let's say, how do you can make sure that not the same project is sold and it's getting financed twice, and the project is actually there? So if it's a building of a certain facility, it once gets funds from the infrastructure subvention, and then it gets funds for the same part for the regional development fund.
So, in European Union financial terms, any project could only be financed up to a certain level from EU funds, and it could only get money from one fund. Because if you have a co-financing system whereby I put up 50% and you pay 50%, if you go to someone else in the European Union and get the 50%, I'm not getting a proper sort of, so that is ruled out. In terms of the use of other funding sources, that was encouraged, because if we could reduce the amount of money that we had to put in because they were using funds from other sources. Remember, we would only pay up to 50% of the cost of a project, or if it was in certain areas up to 90%. It's a lot. But so we had ways of trying to make sure that part of the selection process was to make sure that the project was properly financed. The question, when can you begin this project, immediately takes you on to finance. And the question, where is the finance coming from? If we're putting up, often we would, when a project came up, we would say they would look for X, and we would say we're only prepared to pay half X. And we would lead them to go away and find the money somewhere else, which is also a part of the selection process. Let me give you an example. The architect Daniel Liebeskind had won a competition to make in the north of England, in one of our areas, an offshoot of the Imperial War Museum, which was great. It was obviously going to be, it was a very run-down area, and we were suddenly going to get this very high prestige building. But they wanted more money than we were prepared to put in. And they came to see us, and we said, look, the land around is owned by one landowner, and the value of this land is going to increase enormously because this development is coming here. So why can't you go to see him and get him to put up a couple of £1 million? Because that's in actual fact what happened. So you can have quite a constructive conversation about financing, which first of all makes sure that you don't co-finance yourself, because that was like punishable by death, or you can explore other ways of getting funding, so lottery funding, and this is the case also in the Federal Republic. There are multiple sources of funding, and part of the process is to try to make sure that these all work together as well, as good as possible.
The question, if you don't mind. The European Court of Auditors regularly evaluates many things, including cohesion policy projects. And the last report I've seen was, I think it was published in September last year. It was not very positive about it. I don't know if you might have happened to come across it, but it was not very positive. I'm not saying it was kind of catastrophic, but many shortcomings of the whole system, the whole process have been defined and publicized and made public for the public. So, question, what does the theory and practice, including your personal experience as the Minister for Regional Development of the EU, tell us, or should tell us about how we can, to what extent these reports are helpful, to what extent they're taken into account when evaluating the policy or projects, which is part of the policy or implementation, and adjusting it.
Okay. In a minute you'll discover my opinion of the Court of Auditors, but the first thing to say is that we had our own audit group.
You mean DG?
Yeah. And it consisted of a force of, I think, something like 60 auditors. And they would go out and audit programs and projects. And so the business of clawing that money back from the land registry, for example, in Greece, wasn't anything to do with the Court of Auditors. It was a part of our own process. We would also have, in many of these management committees, these program management committees, there would be a desk officer from DG Regional Policy. Now, she may only be there as an observer, but clearly that gave us an insight into what was going on, and this would enable us to either, because we're always looking for things which are going wrong before they go wrong, it would give us the chance to say to the people, don't do that, please don't do that, you'll just get into all sorts of a fuss, and something else is better. Or they would give us a warning, and we could send our own auditors and show that we would take the money back. And in actual fact, if you looked at the way in which the policy worked, leaving out the Court of Auditors, there was very, very little fraud. There's probably more fraud now as a result of some of the things which take place in places like Romania than there was then. But I thought we were pretty much on top of any systematic fraud. Romania joined the European Union the day I left the European Commission. And
you went to leave, right?
No.
The Brits don't do that. Sorry.
We'd been trying to prepare for the enlargement to Poland and Romania. Romania and Bulgaria came in 2 years after Poland and the others. And these last 2 years, we were having problems with Romania. It was quite clear that Romania did not have financial control systems, did not have audit systems, and did not have the mental the mindset to actually play honourably. And for quite some time I was extremely comfortable about this, because the message coming down from the top of the European Union was, never mind, it's going to be ages before they join. It's going to be, so just keep saying no. We're trying to make things better, but it doesn't matter, you keep saying no, we're all comfortable with this. And then, just as a result of like super state pressure, the instructions changed. It became a good idea for Romania and Bulgaria to join quickly. Now, when I say super state pressure, why did the enlargement to Poland and the others take place when it did? Well, there's an enormous amount of pressure from the United States to actually make sure that they did not slip back into the Russian or Soviet orbit, the Soviet Union having disappeared. So it was the same kind of consideration. So now I was uncomfortable, because I couldn't say no blithely any longer, because I was beginning to... So I decided that, okay, I used the law, the regulations. The regulations said that people could submit programs. We, as part of our examination, would look at their financial management systems and so on, and take a position. So I thought, okay, they can submit their programs, and we will never approve them. We will keep them here, and we will keep saying you must improve these systems before we will. But I left that, so that was my game plan. I'd worked out exactly how I was going to keep myself alive, okay? But I left, and I think in the end you get into all sorts of drama. You're not approving the program, you're not spending the money, and if you're not spending the money, eventually you come under pressure. You should be spending this money, so you're trying to always, as a policy manager, you're trying to balance different considerations, and they eventually started to approve programs. And they've never managed, in my view, to get to the sort of situation which Ukraine is getting to. And so you have this sort of set of circumstances where they had an anti-corruption Tsar, whatever you want to call them, in Romania, a woman who was extremely effective, so effective that the union wanted to make her the anti-corruption officer for the entire European Union. And the Romanian government has protested, and has successfully, I think. They first of all protested, and people said, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? Because this person has been pointing you out as crooks, and some of you have gone to prison, so of course you say this about her. And then the Romanians, as it were, breathed again, thought, oh. So they then started to say, well, she's a crook. And that is normally a killer allegation, and I don't know where it's going to end, but it looks as if she might not actually get. So now then, the Court of Auditors. The Court of Auditors is a strange place. First of all, it is, I'm sorry about these technicalities now, okay. It's a European Union institution, but it's not in Brussels, it's in Luxembourg. And the auditors see themselves, because they're appointed by the member states, they see themselves as member state officials. In fact, they often are member state officials. So when they look at what we do, they bring a set of baggage, which is not European Union baggage, it's national baggage. So, for example, the United Kingdom doesn't like the European Union spending any money. So the auditor from the United Kingdom is constantly harping on about the same sorts of things. You don't spend money properly. And we can all see now how perfect the United Kingdom administration is by the success they're making of their Brexit negotiations. Anyway, so they tend to, they come to a policy which has spent, so the annual expenditure on European regional development policy is something like 28 billion euros. That's a lot of money to audit. They have a technique where they...
Sorry, did you say annual 28 billion only?
Yeah. Annual 28 billion euros only. It's a lot.
Making no sense.
So,
In some cases, nonsense.
so their way of auditing is to go through lots of documents and look for what they consider to be sort of systemic failures. Now these, and they call these irregularities, and they have words for these things which make them look as if they hardly ever detect fraud. They just say the law says you should have, this should have been in a document on A4 paper, and it's not, it's on A5 paper. Or the law says that this report should have, they tend to criticize the procedures rather than whether the money's been properly used. For a long time, when I was in the policy, they didn't actually audit the piece that I was responsible for. This was before I was the Director General. So they didn't do my piece. I was a bit, quite honestly, I was a bit pissed off about this. I thought, why is it that they won't audit my bit? But they eventually did audit my bit. And the draft audit report came just before I went on holiday, and I read it, and I was furious. I cannot tell you how worthless this document was. Okay? So I cancelled my holidays, and I took their report, and I had to prepare the reply, and I went through it sentence by sentence. The document is about 50 pages long, okay? So it said paragraph 1, sentence 1. This is correct. Paragraph 2, sentence 2, this is incorrect, and is not, and this conclusion cannot be drawn from I went through the whole thing like this, okay, my report, and then I submitted it, and then I went on holiday. I came back from holiday, and I was convened and told, you do not speak to the Court of Auditors in this way. You cannot deal with the Court of Auditors in this way. You're supposed to actually... So I was sent off to a meeting, and in this meeting I was being beaten up by the people in charge of the relations with the Court of Auditors, and I was called out to the telephone, and on the other end of the phone was my Director General, and he told me that I had to agree with what these other people were saying to me, okay? So I went back into the meeting. I said, okay, well, I'll take it away. I wasn't going to give in, but I said, I'll take it away and look at it, okay? And I did. And there's no doubt that I was sinking. I would shortly be invisible beneath the water. I was going to be done for. When, miracle of miracles, and totally unsolicited on my behalf, the head civil servant in the European Commission, the Secretary General, sent around a letter to all Directorates General to say he had just seen the DG Regional Policy response to the Court of Auditors, and he found this to be a model way in which to deal with the Court of Auditors. So, suddenly I was okay, and then the Court of Auditors came and said, would we change? And I said, no, it's fine. They said, well, we're going to publish our report. I said, okay, you have to publish our report alongside. They said, but we can't publish your report. I said, well, I'm not going to change it. So the Court of Auditors said, if we withdraw our report and represent a new report, will you agree to criticise just 2 or 3 things in it? So they totally rewrote their report. And my view about the Court of Auditors is that, and I said this to them, that they didn't play fair. They weren't really, and even now, in the latest changes in EU regional policy, there are a number of things being done which I consider to be suboptimal in order to please the Court of Auditors, rather than saying to the Court of Auditors, I'm sorry, if you want to say this, you have to justify it.
Is it like Politburo of the Communist Party?
I don't know, I've never worked with a Communist Party, but it's... You had they were... Lots of the things that I can understand that they have a role in making sure that the regulations and the law is properly applied. But as an advisor to the President of the Commission at an earlier time, I had to go through a thing called the apurement de compte. So I was responsible for agriculture, which was the biggest spending policy. And the Court of Auditors would object to some of the spending, and we would have to work out how much money we would claw back as a result of what the Court of Auditors had said. So it's a pity that Alexandra's gone, because this concerns the Federal Republic. There had been a scheme to pay a premium for the slaughter of old cows or something of this sort, to try to combat the milk surplus, okay? And this scheme was supposed to begin on something like the 1st of April. And in Germany, it had been started on the 31st of March. And the total expenditure on the scheme, which went on for about a year, was something like 300 million euros. And the Court of Auditors recommended that we withdraw 300 million euros from the Federal Republic because of this fault in the way in which the regulation had been applied. And this is a meeting with all sorts of people around, so you can't actually say what you would really like to say. You can't say, you must be joking. You must be bloody crazy to think that we're justified in drawing back 300 million because they started a day early, doing the thing that we wanted them to do. I mean, the apurement de compte. So, and in this meeting, which was these meetings, which I had to have, I was supposed to have these meetings once a year, but the apurement de compte was about 4 years late, 4 years behind. And I was sufficiently unlucky that in the period that I had to do this job, they decided that they would catch up. So instead of having to do 4 of these meetings, I had to do 8. And they were real torture, really unbearable torture. But that was with the Court of Auditors. And I find that if you have a body, I don't know whether the Politburo of the Communist Party behaves like that or not, but I find that a group of people who find pleasure in saying that we should draw back 300 millions because something started a day early.
The good news is, I understand this is since 2006, but now the reports are published and made public with the comments of the European Commission.
They always were.
They always were.
Yeah, they were. But the strange thing was that part of the sort of part of the way in which this was done is that people would reply to the Court of Auditors in a rather general way. The Court of Auditors would say something like, we noted 5% errors in this expenditure, and somebody would write, we've undertaken the following actions to try to reduce the error rate and blah, blah, blah. And the assertion that they've noted 5% of error was never challenged. You would say what you were doing as a response to it. And in my case, yeah, and this was what the Commission did then for a certain period of time afterward. If one man working for 1 month thinks that he can audit expenditure of 25 billion euros, then he's really quite close to being Superman or something. Huh? It's not. So they look for a very general sort of almost climatic complaint. Any more? No.
I suggest one last question maybe. We are sitting now 1.5 hours maybe. Yeah.
In Ukraine we have a situation when projects that are annually submitted by local authorities are mostly socially oriented. Definitely it's very important because to build, to refurbish social infrastructure is a significant thing for our society, but it could stifle the economic development of the regions. My question is, do you in EU pay attention to this problem, to maintaining some balance of socially oriented and value-added projects, or maybe you do it using social criteria, or maybe in somehow?
Yeah. So for us, a program would have a number of priorities. And in the construction of the program, we would, by agreement with the region, have allocated finance to each of these priorities. And often among these priorities, there will be one for sort of social type development. So right from the beginning, there would be a doorway into the program for this kind of project, with a ceiling imposed on the amount of money that could go for that kind of a project. We every year we would review the progress towards these ceilings. And by a certain process, we could, but not too soon, if we were to discover, say, 1 year before the program ended, that the social projects had used up all of their money and there's still a need, but the infrastructure development hadn't used up all of their money, because we might pump some of the infrastructure money into the other thing. Now, but we took the view that in some of our areas, if you can't improve social conditions, you cannot improve economic conditions. So take the city of Liverpool. Large parts of Liverpool are run down, extremely poor quality housing, poor quality, low, because the city is run down, you have a low level of qualification in the workforce. You want to attract industry, you want to attract business. What does business see when it looks into the area? It sees run-down neighbourhoods, lack of qualified workers, low quality city infrastructure in terms of culture or whatever, and the investment goes elsewhere. No one wants to go there. So it was almost as if you had a preliminary stage before economic development, where you had to do a certain amount of social development to come up to where you can actually start to carry out, let's call it economic development. You can see it in other ways. You have a factory, an old factory which is demolished, and you want to reuse the site for a new factory. But often the old site is polluted, or it's going to require a certain amount of cost before this site actually becomes a usable site. You can't attract anyone to build on this site until you've invested money in bringing the site up. So it's a fairly common problem in economic development that in order to approach, let's call it the conditions of takeoff, you have to do all of this, you have to do a certain amount of social investment first. You want people to have a high level of qualification. You want the housing stock to be better because you're trying to get people to move into the area. You want the city centre to look smart so people can live in it. So in Liverpool we identified the 7 worst off areas, and we carried out in each of these 7 areas special sub-programs to try to actually raise the quality of the area. So I don't think even in the European Union, even in a place like the Federal Republic, the idea that everywhere is uniformly good is not right. People wouldn't want to, after 1989, people didn't want to go to invest in parts of Saxonia because it was heavily polluted. So there was a certain amount of social investment that was necessary before you can actually get economic activity going. So, and after 1989, of course, in the new lender of the Federal Republic, that was quite a heavy investment. When we started with our regional policy, it was the same kind of backlog, and it's here the same kind of backlog. You have, as it were, neglect going back a number of years, not for any other reason that the money wasn't available, or people weren't helped to do these things, or the people who you were trying to do it in a centralized way and decentralized need wasn't being properly registered. So you have a backlog. So I find it's harsh if you say we can't use some of our money, at least, for social type projects. This is so, and I find it's bad to say no. It's administratively bad to say no. Sometimes you have to say no, but where you can say yes, you should try to say yes. I've said to you before, if it's a clear yes, it's yes. If it's don't know, it's yes. It's only no that's no. In most administrations, it's yes which is yes, it's don't know which is no, and it's no which is no. And then nothing happens. It's terrible. So you have to be a yes-saying administration. If I could just have 2 sentences at the end. So all of this stuff about selection criteria is part of the effort that you make from the centre to direct by sort of radio-controlled techniques a decentralized policy. We have other ways as well, where we try to establish, as it were, more clearly boundaries on the kind of investment that they can do. We can talk about them at another time if you want. But one of the ways is through the approval from the centre of selection criteria developed in what we would call ramadas, or you would call ramadas, we would call something else. And in this way we radio control what they do, but they do it. Right, thank you.
That was the 2 sentences?
Sorry, yes.